It sounds like clickbait, but it's not. This overlooked factor is just as bad and sometimes even worse for our health than smoking. Plus, this risk factor has started to skyrocket in recent years, as a new study that we'll go through shortly reports on. Yet this problem, it still isn't getting the attention that it needs for us to address it and fix it. Many of us first became aware of this risk factor through an influential TED Talk that was delivered in 2015. It's among the most watched ever with 50 million views. In the talk, Harvard psychologist Robert Waldinger poses a simple question: what makes a good life? The talk has gotten so many views because he provides a surprising answer. Waldinger oversees what is probably the longest-running study of people. It's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development, and it began back in 1938, and it's still going. Researchers have followed a group of over 700 men from their late teenage years into old age, and during that whole time, they collected extensive data on everything from work to relationships to blood pressure and brain health. So what's the answer to Waldinger's question? Well, he says that the clearest lesson that they've seen from all of the research over many decades is this: good relationships help keep us happier and healthier. It's the most important factor in life going well. In fact, they found that they could predict health in old age better by looking at relationships at 50 than any other health measure. And the flip side of the lesson is this: loneliness kills. The socially isolated will live shorter, they'll be less happy and less healthy overall. So it turns out that social connections have a powerful impact on health. Humans are social creatures. Isolate us and we die, and there's a reason why solitary confinement is used as a punishment. And since that TED Talk in 2015, the data has only gotten stronger, and we'll go through the studies and look at why loneliness is skyrocketing and some possible solutions. A meta-analysis published in 2023 assembled the growing research that looked at two distinct measures: social isolation and loneliness. So social isolation is about how many social connections we have. It's an objective measure. Loneliness is about how we feel. A person can be socially isolated but not feel lonely, and the reverse is also possible. So looking at them separately shows us something surprising, which we'll come to in a moment. But here's what they found: both social isolation and loneliness are associated with an increased risk of all-cause mortality. For loneliness, that increase is 14% during the study period. For social isolation, it's a massive 32%. Then they looked at mortality from specific causes. Social isolation boosted the risk of cancer mortality by 24% during the study period, and for death from heart disease to 34%. The effect sizes for social isolation were always bigger in the analysis compared to loneliness, and there's a crucial implication for that. Lacking social connections with others poses serious health risks, even if we don't feel lonely. And recent data has uncovered an impact in other areas as well. Loneliness increased the risk of dementia by 31%, and Alzheimer's disease specifically by nearly 40%, and it's been linked to shorter telomere length, which is a marker of cellular aging. Now, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that there's a potential concern with the data that we've looked at. The studies that we have on impacts on social isolation tell us about associations. For ethical reasons, of course, we can't run a randomized controlled trial where we assign one group to be lonely and the other group to not be. So how do we know if the link here is causal? Well, the answer to that is that researchers are incredibly careful about what they take into account in terms of other factors, and they try and account for these as much as possible. They do their best to rule out other potential explanations for the patterns that we see, and at this point, we've got a massive pile of data, and this gives us confidence that what we're seeing is truly a causal connection. It's similar to smoking. We can't create a trial where we assign people to smoking and another group that don't. But the negative health impacts of smoking is considered so well established, again because we've got such an overwhelming amount of data. So we've got compelling evidence that social isolation and loneliness are literally deadly. But how widespread are these problems? Well, unfortunately, they're common, and we need to take an honest look at the problem, and then we'll have a look at some potential solutions. An article in the Journal of the American Medical Association recently got my attention, and it's the reason why I wanted to make this video. It draws on survey data between 2018 and 2024. The most recent numbers show that over 33% of US adults between the ages of 50 to 80 sometimes or often feel a lack of companionship. 29% sometimes or often feel isolated. Another study found that 43% of American adults felt isolated and 39% reported not feeling close to anyone. And this isn't just a problem in the United States. 34% of adults in Australia are lonely, and in Eastern Europe, around a quarter of older adults reported loneliness. and the trends only seem to be getting worse. So now we come to the really important questions. What factors are generating this trend of increasing isolation, and what steps can we take to get connected with others? Well, the first factor driving this trend that probably comes to mind is smartphones. In under 2 decades, we've seen the world transformed from one where people interact with each other face to face to one where most of us spend hours staring into screens each day. And globally, people spend an average of an incredible 6 hours and 40 minutes on screens every day. And yes, certainly smartphones haven't helped, but this is just a continuation of a much longer trend. So back in 2000, the political scientist Robert Putnam wrote a bestseller called Bowling Alone, where he chronicled the collapse of social organizations since the 1960s. As the years passed, people were spending less and less time outside their homes in the community with others. And the other drivers of this change have been happening in countries all over the globe at the same time. Putnam pointed to the rise of television and other forms of media. New patterns of building meant that homes were further apart and neighborhoods were no longer walkable. Reinforcing these trends was a growing cultural emphasis on individualism. Plus, people started to have fewer kids, and the number of people living alone has grown steadily. In the UK, for instance, the government data from 2023 showed that 30% of all households were people living alone. So we've got so many trends working against us when it comes to forming social connections. So what can we do? Well, we might be thinking that if we're active on social media, that may help. After all, it's a form of social interaction, but interestingly, research has found that the more time spent on social media is actually associated with more loneliness. And we've got lots of data that more time online is generally bad for mental health. So what actually helps? One recent meta-analysis looked at a wide variety of programs aimed at reducing loneliness. Researchers noticed that successful interventions tended to have some features in common. First, they were longer term. Changes to promote social connections, they aren't going to be quick fixes. They need to involve a shift in lifestyle. Second, programs that gathered people into groups worked better than those that didn't. Third, online interventions didn't work nearly as well compared to those that involved in-person contact. And finally, the more interaction, the better. This included between a facilitator and the group as well as in between group members. So now if you're watching this video, chances are you aren't trying to design an intervention to reduce loneliness for others, but the lessons here apply to each of us individually. To reduce loneliness and foster connection, we have to make sure that we prioritize social connections. We all know for our health that we need to eat a healthy diet, exercise regularly, sleep well, but what's too often overlooked are our social connections. Instead, we want to maximize social interaction in person with many other people in a way that becomes part of our ongoing lifestyle for the long term. And the exact form that this takes will depend on our personalities, but here are 4 ideas. Hopefully, if you're watching this channel, you already exercise regularly. So one option is to go to the gym or go for a run with a friend or family member, join an exercise class or a running club. Second, try and think how you can incorporate what you already do in your day-to-day activities and add a social component to it. So I have 3 kids, for example, and many of my friends also have kids. So we'll meet at each other's houses or go to a cafe. The kids can play together and the adults can chat. Plus, our kids are starting to reach the age where they're playing sport. So while we're watching our kids play, my friends and I can catch up. A third option, if you enjoy reading, join a book club. Invite neighbors, friends, even co-workers to read one book together each month and then gather to discuss it. And the fourth option is to volunteer. Every community has charitable organizations where people come together to meet a need or work to promote a cause. We have to make socializing a priority. And when it comes to health threats, social isolation isn't the only one that's easy to miss. There's another silent killer that many don't realize is slowly causing us damage in our bodies. So make sure to check out this next video here to find out how it contributes to dementia risk.